Let's start digging a little bit deeper. We've run Nmap, we've seen what ports are open, what services are running behind these ports, we've even seen what versions these services have. But I want more information. I want to start finding particular vulnerabilities that I can exploit. And to do that, as we've seen before, we use a vulnerability scanner. In the Hacking for Beginners course, we went over Nessus on Windows. In the Kali Linux tutorial, I showed you how to install Nessus on Kali. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the Nessus service. And I do that using the /etc/init.d/nessusd start command. Now that it's up and running, I actually don't remember what port exactly the Nessus service runs on. So I'm going to use one of the commands that we've learned before, which is the netstat command, to see what services are running on my machine. And here we go. There it is. This is the nessusd running on port 8834. So I've opened the page, and you might notice that this looks a little bit different than the previous Nessus and the previous videos, and this is because this is an updated video with the latest Nessus version. So it does look a little bit different. However, the core of it and how we do the scans is pretty much still exactly the same. I'm going to log in using my username and password that I created during the installation process, and I'm going to start a new scan. You see here a lot of different options that we talk about in more advanced courses. For now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the basic network scan. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to name my scan Metasploitable2. I'll leave the description empty, and my target is the IP address of the Metasploitable machine. I'll save it, and remember, after you save it, you need to launch the scan. It will not start automatically. So I'm going to launch it, and you see now the green arrows spinning around telling me that the scan is running. To see where my scan progress is, I can double click on it. And if I want to go back, I can go back to my scans. So it's still running here. Notice the difference between the running and the completed scans. Let me double click on it again. And now you might see a slight difference in the Nessus graphical interface now. So I can actually go and look at the vulnerabilities tab to see what vulnerabilities have been discovered so far. Keep in mind that the scan is still running. So if I go back to my scans, it's still going on. There will be more vulnerabilities to be discovered. I'm going to speed the video up a little bit. And now that the scan is complete, I can go to the vulnerabilities and start looking at them one by one. On the right hand side, there's some scan details. It tells me the name of the scan, what the status is, what the policy I used. So I used the basic network scan here. The scanner, so this is if I'm using multiple scanners. When did it start, when did it end, and how long it took. So in my case, it took about 7 minutes. Obviously, I'm not going to keep the video running for 7 minutes, so I just fast forwarded to the end of the scan. So don't be surprised if you see the scan taking a lot longer than the length of this video. You'll also notice that the vulnerabilities are grouped by criticality, from the highest to the lowest. Critical risk is the highest in the ratings of criticality. Then you have under that the high, medium, low, and info. Keep in mind though, just because a vulnerability is medium or low, that does not mean we get to ignore it. In the Hacking for Beginners course, we saw how we managed to break into our target using a low severity vulnerability. For the purpose of this course, however, we're going to be focusing on some of the most critical ones, because going through 108 vulnerabilities will end up dragging this video on for days. So let's focus on the more critical ones, and to see the details of any vulnerability, I can just click on it and read the description of what an attacker can do and what the result can be. Just to go back on the point of the criticality of vulnerabilities, if I do a quick search for FTP, you'll notice that Nessus returned only one finding, which is the FTP server detection, meaning that Nessus managed to detect that there is an FTP service running. However, Nessus did not tell me that this FTP server that we just exploited is actually vulnerable. So for some reason, whatever that reason might be, Nessus failed to detect that that particular FTP server is actually vulnerable and is exploitable. So for some particular reason, Nessus failed to detect that this particular FTP server is vulnerable. Now again, I do not want to concern you or myself with the reason of why this happened. It could be that the scan got interrupted, that the service crashed, that the network is unreliable, whatever it is. And this is why we never ever rely on just one tool output. This is why we investigate using Nmap, we investigate using Nessus, we investigate manually by connecting to each service. And we investigate using a lot of other tools as well. So do keep that in mind. Just because the vulnerability scanner does not say it's vulnerable, that does not mean it's not vulnerable.